السابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So last time then we began on the second or the sect of the Jahmiyyah, and we gave some background introduction regarding who the Jahmiyyah are, the followers of Jahm ibn Safwan, and the history and the timeline of that. And then we were going through some of the major errors that the Jahmiyyah fell into. And we mentioned last time the error of the Jahmiyyah when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then after that we arrived at the second major error of the Jahmiyyah, which was regarding the decree of Allah. And I think we covered that one as well, mostly regarding the error in the decree. And we had arrived at the third point, which was regarding Iman. That they say Iman is simply al-ma'rifah, having knowledge of Allah. And if a person has knowledge of Allah, this recognition of Allah, then that is Iman as far as they are concerned. But then based upon that, it would mean that even Iblis is therefore a believer, because even he had the ma'rifah, even he had that recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so according to them, kufr is not having knowledge of Allah. If a person does not have knowledge of Allah, then that is kufr. But if you have knowledge of Allah, then that is Iman as far as they are concerned. فَزَعَمُوا أَنَّ الْكُفْرَ بِاللَّهِ هُوَ الْجَهْلُ بِهِ وَأَنَّ الْإِنسَانَ إِذَا أَتَى بِالْمَعْرِفَةِ وَجَحَدَ بِلِسَانِهِ أَنَّهُ لَا يَكْفُرُ بِجَحْدِهِ. And they said if a person has that knowledge in his heart regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it exists in his heart, then after that, even if upon his tongue he rejects it, then he is still a believer, because that knowledge and that recognition is still there in his heart, even if upon his tongue he is rejecting it. وَأَنَّ الْإِيمَانَ لَا يَتَبَعَّضْ وَلَا يَتَفَاضَلْ أَهْلُهُ فِيهِ وَأَنَّ الْإِيمَانَ وَالْكُفْرَ لَا يَكُونَانِ إِلَّا بِالْقَلْبِ دُونَ غَيْرِهِ مِنَ الْجَوَارِحِ. And they believe that Iman is one entity. They believe Iman is one entity, one item. And that because it is one entity, one item, that you cannot remove sections of it. It's one solid piece, nothing comes off it. One solid piece they believe Iman is. And that the people of Iman do not fluctuate, they do not have different levels, everybody is of the same level. And that Iman and Kufr, they only occur within the heart. Nothing to do with the limbs, they say. So according to them, it is all purely in the heart. Doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what you do, it's what's in the heart that determines who a mu'min is as far as they are concerned. And we know, of course, that is completely false. It is not just what is in the heart. It also requires the statement of the tongue and the actions of the limbs to go with it. So then, regarding this belief of theirs in Iman, they say من أتى بالمعرفة ثم جحد بلسانه لم يكفر بجحده لأن العلم والمعرفة لا يزولان بالجحد فهو مؤمن. قال والإيمان لا يتبعض ولا يتفاضل أهله فيه فإيمان الأنبياء وإيمان الأمة على نمط واحد إذ المعارف لا تتفاضل. So according to them, Iman does not go up and down, it's not different levels. Everybody has the same level of Iman. Everybody has that same block of Iman. So the Iman you and I have is the same level of Iman that the prophets had. According to them, the Iman you and I have, that is the same level of Iman that the prophets and messengers had. And we know again that is of course obviously false. People have different levels of Iman, and some have Iman that is higher and some have Iman that is lower. So from these false beliefs of theirs, there are multiple problems that arise. Firstly, as we already mentioned, according to this definition of theirs, then people like Iblis, the Shaitan Iblis, and people like the Pharaoh at the time of the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, they would both be considered mu'min. Shaitan, Iblis knew Allah. The Pharaoh at the time of the Prophet Musa alayhi salam knew Allah. So according to their statement, both Iblis and Pharaoh would be considered as believers according to that statement of theirs. And also, أن من عرف الله وعمل أعمال الكفر به كالسجود للصنم والاستهزاء بالله عز وجل أو إهانة الأنبياء وسبهم بل وقتلهم كل ذلك لا يخرجهم من الإسلام بل هو مؤمن عنده كامل الإيمان وكفى بهذا ضلالا. Also, they said that if you have that knowledge in your heart, you have that recognition in your heart of Allah, that is Iman regardless of what you do upon your limbs. So then based upon that, a person could have that knowledge in their heart, but on their limbs they may prostrate to idols. Upon their limbs they may prostrate to idols, or they may make a mockery of Allah, or they may degrade the prophets, or curse them, or even kill them. But none of those actions would take them out of the fold of Islam. None of those actions would make them a disbeliever according to them. Because those actions, even if they go and do them, their Iman is in their heart. They know Allah. They have knowledge of Allah, recognition of Allah in their hearts. They are mu'min. Even if they kill the prophets in their actions, and they curse the prophets, and they mock the religion, or they mock Allah, none of that would make them disbelievers according to this principle and this ideology of the Jahmiyyah. Then you could add to this تضاف إلى بدعة وضلالاته وبدعه وضلالاته فإنا نعلم يقينا أن الله كفر اليهود وكفر كفار قريش ولعن إبليس وفرعون وقد أثبت لهم معرفته فقال عن اليهود في معرفتهم للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم. So to rebuke or refute the Jahmiyyah even further, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared the Jews to be kuffar. Allah declared the Jews to be kuffar. Even though Allah declared the Jews to be kuffar and the Quraysh at the time of the Messenger to be kuffar, and Allah cursed Iblis and Pharaoh, and Allah affirmed that the Jews had the knowledge. The Jews did have the knowledge, but that didn't make them Muslim. As Allah said about them, يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم, that they know him, they know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam just as they know their sons. They have a deep recognition, a deep knowledge, and yet despite that we know Allah still declared the Jews to be disbelievers. Also the kuffar of Quraysh, they had knowledge of Allah, and yet they were declared as disbelievers, as Allah said, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ قُلِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. If you were to ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they would say, certainly it is Allah. So they knew. Certainly it is Allah. They would say, لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. Yet despite that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared them as kuffar, as disbelievers. وَقَالَ عَنْ إِبْلِيسِ. And Allah said about Iblis, قال فبما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم. Here Shaitan, he mentions that the misguidance he is upon, he is going to wait for mankind upon the straight path to take them away from it. So he affirms, Iblis affirms, and he's talking to Allah, knows Allah. And yet, of course, we know that he is upon kufr outright. Also, Pharaoh knew Allah, yet he was still a kafir outright. As Allah said in the Quran, وَجَحَدُوا بِهَا وَاسْتَيْقَنَتْهَا أَنفُسُهُمْ ظُلْمًا وَعُلُوًّا فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. وَجَحَدُوا بِهَا وَاسْتَيْقَنَتْهَا أَنفُسُهُمْ. استيقنتها أنفسهم, meaning inside they were certain, they knew of Allah, and they knew that all the signs came from Allah. Inside they knew, استيقنتها أنفسهم, but outwardly they were pretending and being arrogant and saying what they were saying. So all of these evidences highlight that they all had ma'rifah, and yet Allah declared them all to be disbelievers. So we know that this statement of the Jahmiyyah regarding Iman being just ma'rifah, just knowing Allah and that's it, regardless of what actions you do, is a completely false opinion, a completely false statement, completely misguided and incorrect. Then after that, قول الجهمية في الجنة والنار. The statement of the Jahmiyyah when it comes to paradise and hellfire. the statement of the Jahmiyyah when it comes to paradise and hellfire. What did they say about paradise and hellfire? What is famously reported from them, اشتهر عن جهم من الأقوال أو مما اشتهر عن جهم من الأقوال, from among the statements that are well known from Jahm ibn Safwan is قوله إن الجنة والنار تفنيان وتبيدان. قال أبو الحسن الأشعري يحكي قول جهم الذي تفرد به جهم القول بأن الجنة والنار تبيدان وتفنيان. They believe that paradise and hellfire, they will basically become extinguished or finished at one stage. That they will not remain, they will finish at some stage, be wiped out, and there'll be no more paradise and no more hell at some stage. And of course we know from the Aqidah of Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah that this statement of theirs is incorrect. What we know is that paradise and hellfire certainly remain forever. Paradise and hellfire, they remain forever. And they do not come to an end and they do not finish. They remain forever. The only difference some of the scholars might have is about what? Anyone?
The different type of hell?
So, in hellfire, there is the hellfire where the kuffar are going to go into. But then there is, as some scholars say, a section of the hellfire where the Muslims go into, the ones who are going to be punished. But we know that those Muslims, if they died upon Tawheed, even if they are punished in the hell for a while, eventually they will be all taken out into paradise and put in paradise, which means their section of the fire becomes empty. Some scholars said that section then finishes, because all the people of Tawheed have been taken out and put into paradise. No one left now in that section finishes. But the rest of the actual main fire remains forever. That is what some scholars have mentioned. But the point is overall that the hellfire does not come to an end. This is incorrectly attributed to Ibn al-Qayyim and others. They never said the hellfire comes to an end. The best you're going to get to is that explanation there perhaps. And there is no correct opinion saying that the hellfire comes to an end. So that is a mistake as well that the Jahmiyyah, they fell into, in claiming that the hellfire and paradise, they will come to an end and not remain. Those are some of the main misguidances of the Jahmiyyah. After that, we go into the Mu'tazilah. Now we have a group called the Mu'tazilah. المعتزلة فرقة من الفرق الإسلامية التي ظهرت في بداية القرن الثاني الهجري. The Mu'tazila are one of these misguided sects that first emerged at the start of the 2nd century Islamic calendar. They first emerged at the start of the 2nd century on the Islamic calendar. وهم من أكثر الكلام أو أكثر أهل الكلام ارتباطا به وتعلقا بأذياله، فكل مذهبهم الذي خالفوا فيه السنة مبني على الكلام وذلك أن من أصولهم المعتبرة لديهم تقديم العقل على النقل. The greatest calamity of the Mu'tazila is this principle, where they said the intellect is given precedence and priority over the texts. Meaning, if they came across an ayah in the Quran which their intellects couldn't understand and work out, they would then say, think about it, let's see what we can work out in our minds. When they would work out an explanation in their minds, they would give that priority over what the ayah was actually saying. Because the ayah didn't make sense, so then they used their intellect to make it make sense. But then by doing that, they actually completely misinterpreted these texts into something that they do not mean. So they have this principle, whenever something difficult comes up in the texts, your intellect gets priority over it. Your intellect gets priority over it. Work it out in your mind, what it could mean, how it could mean. When you work out something that works, then that's the meaning of it, regardless of what it might actually say. Priority of your intellect over what the texts are actually saying. And they were from the greatest of the groups when it comes to rhetoric, the philosophy and that type of affair. They were from the greatest of them involved in that. So when did they first arise? The details of that. يرجع نشأة المعتزلة كثير أو يرجع نشأة المعتزلة كثير من أهل العلم إلى حادثة جرت في مجلس الحسن البصري. Many of the scholars, they say that the source of the Mu'tazila, where they first arose, was from an incident that occurred with Al-Hasan al-Basri. What is that incident? وذلك أن رجلا دخل على مجلس الحسن البصري فقال. A man entered upon the gathering, the circle of Al-Hasan al-Basri, and said, يا إمام الدين لقد ظهرت قبلنا جماعة يكفرون أصحاب الكبائر وجماعة يقولون الكبيرة لا تضر صاحبها بل العمل على مذهبهم غير واجب فكيف تحكم لنا. There was a man who walked into the gathering, to the circle of Al-Hasan al-Basri, and said to him, O Imam of the religion, there are some people who have appeared where we live. Some people have appeared and they declare those who fall into major sins as being kuffar. They do takfir of those who fall into major sins. And there's another group who have arisen. They say, no matter what actions you do, it does not harm you as long as you have iman in your heart. So two extremes. He said these two extremes of people have emerged from where we are. So what do you judge? What's your judgment regarding this affair for us? وقبل أن يجيب الحسن البصري قال واصل بن عطاء. Before Al-Hasan al-Basri gave an answer, Wasil ibn Ata, who was there, he said, أنا لا أقول إن صاحب الكبير مؤمن مطلق ولا كافر مطلق بل هو في منزلة بين المنزلتين. ثم قام واعتزل إلى اسطوانة المسجد يقرر ما أجاب به. فقال الحسن اعتزل عنا واصل فسمي هو وأصحابه المعتزلة. المعتزلة. So before Al-Hasan al-Basri actually even replied or started his reply to that man, Wasil ibn Ata, who was sitting there, spoke up. He said, I do not say, in response to what the man had said, I don't say that such a person is, the one who commits a major sin, is a believer completely. But neither do I say he's a disbeliever completely. He is in a position halfway between the two positions. He is in a state between the two states. This is one of their famous statements. This position between two positions. This state between two states. And then when he said that, he walked off from the gathering, went to a side of the mosque and continued saying what he was saying, affirming that this is the correct position. And of course it is not. But then Al-Hasan said, Wasil ibn Ata has got up and isolated himself from us. He's got up and isolated himself. Wasil gave that answer and then walked off, saying, I'm right, walked off. So Al-Hasan said, look, Wasil ibn Ata, upon his misguided answer, his misguided position, has taken that position basically and left us, isolated from us. So they were known as the Mu'tazila, the ones who isolated away, went away, left and departed. And so that is something that they are famously known for. And that's why you have all the other famous ones, Amr ibn Ubayd al-Mu'tazili. All of the Mu'tazila, the ones who departed away from the scholars. They left the scholars and they departed from them. So here that's what happened at the beginning. That's why they are known as the Mu'tazila. The ones who departed, who left, who went, left the scholars, left Hasan al-Basri. هذا هو الذي عليه أكثر أهل العلم في بيان نشأة المعتزلة وسبب تسميتهم. This is what the majority of the scholars, they say, was the reason as to why they are known as the Mu'tazila. The majority of the scholars, they say that was the reason, that story, that incident which occurred. ثم إن واصل بن عطاء ابتدع بدعا أخرى إضافة إلى بدعته في مرتكب الكبيرة. Then that individual, Wasil ibn Ata, this wasn't his only misguided opinion or position about being in a state between two states like limbo. He had many other issues and misguidances. وهي نفيه للقدر. They rejected the decree. وَنَفْيُهُ لِلصِّفَاتِ, and they rejected the attributes of Allah. وَقَوْلُهُ then there are certain other opinions, but those are the two main ones regarding the decree, regarding those who commit the major sin are in a position between two positions, and regarding the names and attributes of Allah. ووافقه على مقالته في المنزلة بين المنزلتين عمر بن عبيد من باب وهذان يعتبران أو ابن باب هذان يعتبران مؤسسا مذهب الاعتزال. So then you have this other famous one, Amr ibn Ubayd al-Mu'tazili. Amr ibn Ubayd al-Mu'tazili. He is basically the second founder of Al-Mu'tazila. Along with Wasil ibn Ata, you have Amr ibn Ubayd al-Mu'tazili. These two are recognized as the founding forefathers of the methodology of the Mu'tazila. From the most famous leaders that they had, أشهر زعمائهم والمعتزلة يزعمون from not the leaders but from what they claim, يزعمون أن مذهبهم يعود إلى عبد الله بن محمد بن الحنفية إلى علي ibn Abi Talib. They claim that their methodology, it goes back through the chain of narration to Abdullah, the son of Muhammad al-Hanafiya, to Ali ibn Abi Talib. That it goes back to Ali ibn Abi Talib. فيزعمون أن واصلا وعمرا أخذا عن عبد الله، وأخذ عبد الله عن محمد بن الحنفية، ومحمد أخذ عن أبيه علي ibn Abi Talib. They claim this is their chain of narration, and it is of course completely a lie. They say that their chain of narration for their religion is that Wasil and Amr, Wasil ibn al-Ata and Amr ibn Ubayd, that they took their religion and their teachings from Abdullah, who took it from his father Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, and Muhammad took it from his father Ali ibn Abi Talib. So they try to claim that their religion goes back to, or their methodology and their understanding goes back to Ali ibn Abi Talib. وَهَذَا كَلَامٌ لَا مُسْتَنَدْ لَهُ الْبَتَّةِ. There is absolutely no evidence to back this up, this claim that it goes back to Ali ibn Abi Talib. وَعَلِي رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ بَرِيءٌ مِّن ذَلِكَ. Ali radiallahu anhu is innocent of their claims, innocent of what they say. بريء من ذلك ولا يؤثر عنه شيء من كلامهم. And there is no narration from Ali ibn Abi Talib at all talking about the kinds of ideas that the Mu'tazila are upon. No narrations from Ali ibn Abi Talib at all that he was a founder of what they are upon. The Mu'tazila have 5 core principles. The Mu'tazila have the 5 principles, mashallah. The first one, للمعتزلة 5 أصول يقوم عليها مذهبهم. Firstly, the first principle they say is, they themselves, the Mu'tazila say is at-tawheed. But what they mean by tawheed is the names and attributes. And we already know how deviated they are in the names and attributes. So do not be deceived by the title of the first principle. At-tawheed, what they actually mean by that is basically all of the corruption in the names and attributes that they are upon. فالمعتزلة بنوا مقالتهم في الصفات على مذهب جهم بن صفوان من ناحية إنكار اتصاف الباري بالصفات. So in terms of their position regarding the attributes of Allah, then basically they took that from the methodology of Jahm ibn Safwan in rejecting the attributes. وقرروا أن الله يقال عنه عالم لذاته أو بذاته وقادر لذاته أو بذاته وحي لذاته وبذاته. They said that yes, Allah is alim, the all-knowing, He is qadir, the all-capable, and He is hayy, the ever-living. ومعنى عالم نعم لذاته أو لذاته أي أن ذاته موصوفة بالعلم لا أن له علما. But what they actually even mean by that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is attributed to having knowledge in His essence. Knowledge is something which is attributed to Him in His essence. Not that He actually has knowledge. It is something attributed to His essence, not that He actually has any knowledge. And again, they have all of their misguidances as to why you cannot actually say Allah has knowledge, and misguidances and deviances. But that is their first principle. The principle of Tawheed, what they mean by that is the names and attributes, and what they mean by that is basically all of their rejection of the names and attributes of Allah and their deviance and misguidance when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah. The second principle they have is inkarul qadr, the rejection of the decree. That is the second principle of the Mu'tazila. They reject the decree. فالمعتزلة اتفقوا على الأصل الثاني من أصولهم وهو إنكار القدر ويسمونه العدل. They call it al-adl. The second principle is the principle of justice. And that is actually talking about the decree. وذلك أنهم زعموا أن إثبات القدر ينافي العدل. They said because if you affirm the decree, that Allah decreed the affairs, etc., then that negates the concept of justice. That's what they believe. فعليه أنكروا مشيئة الله عز وجل العامة وخلقه لأفعال العباد. So then based upon that, they rejected the decree of Allah or the will of Allah in the general sense, and that Allah creates the actions of the servants, because they couldn't understand the point. They believe that if Allah has decreed everything already and Allah creates your actions, then why are you responsible for going to the hellfire? Those were actions decreed upon you. You had no choice, and we spoke about this last time. وبناء على ذلك قالوا لم يشأ أفعال العباد وإنما تركهم يختارون ما يريدون بدون أن يكون له معهم مشيئة نافذة. So they said Allah has left the servants to do what they want, and Allah has no role to play in that. They do as they wish and they choose as they wish. So Allah does not guide anyone, Allah does not misguide anyone, Allah does not decree evil or bad for anybody or good for anybody. None of that occurs according to them. That is their second principle and misguidance. The third one that they have is the issue of al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, having a position between two positions, being in a state between two states. الأصل الثالث المنزلة بين المنزلتين. خاض المعتزلة كغيرهم من الفرق البدعية في مسمى الفاسق وحكمه من غير رجوع إلى الكتاب والسنة، فكان قولهم خارجا عن أقوال الأمة كلها. فزعموا أن الفاسق له اسم بين اسمين وحكم بين حكمين، فلا يسمى مؤمنا ولا كافرا وإنما يقال فاسق وفاجر ونحو ذلك، وكذلك لا يكون حكمه حكم الكافر. So they have this strange opinion that somebody who commits a sin, who does some wrong, that he is now in a position between two positions. He is upon a ruling between two rulings. You can neither say he's a mu'min nor that he's a kafir. He's not a mu'min, he's not a believer, nor is he a disbeliever. According to them, he's not a believer nor a disbeliever. You have to just use words like fasiq or other things. You can't say he's a believer, you can't say he's a disbeliever for the one who has committed some sin. So again, we know that is completely fabricated. No such ruling or no such position exists amongst Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, declaring people to be in limbo, neither here nor there, just in the middle, no position, no ruling. That is false and does not exist like that. The fourth principle they have, infadh al-wa'd wal-wa'id. And what they mean by this, the application of the promises and the threats. The promises and the threats. إنفاذ الوعد أن الله يجب عليه أن ينفذ وعده فما وعد به عباده من الثواب فإن العباد يستحقونه وواجب على الله بذله لهم. That whatever Allah has promised mankind from reward, etc., then they are deserving of that, and it is obligatory upon Allah to do that. And as for the opposite, the threat, فهو أن ما توعد الله به من العذاب واقع لا محالة فلا يتجاوز عن الكافر الفساق بل يعذبهم كما توعد ولو لم يفعل ذلك كان مخالفا لوعده. So they said that whatever Allah has threatened, the punishments that have been mentioned as a threat, then those will occur certainly without any possibility of them not occurring. So the disbeliever and the wrongdoer, the sinner, they will be punished on that day. وقالوا إن الفاسق يوم القيامة يعذب بالعذاب الدائم الذي لا يخرج منه. And they say that the sinner will be punished for an eternal punishment that he will not come out of. But to say that the wrongdoers are absolutely going to be punished on that day, we know that is false. And we cannot say that it is one of our principles that the wrongdoers, the people who committed sin, will absolutely, definitely be punished. That is not the case. They are تحت مشيئة الله. Maybe some of them will just be forgiven. Or maybe other things like shafa'ah. Somebody may deserve to be punished, but on the day of judgment, by the intercession that occurs, maybe they are saved from being punished. So this claim of theirs that they are definitely punished is also false. And the fifth principle they have is regarding al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahy 'anil munkar. وهو واجب عندهم إلا أنهم غلوا فيه فجعلوه وسيلة للخروج عن الحاكم الجائر. So as far as they are concerned, the fifth principle of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, they say that is an absolute obligation. Obligation, you cannot get out of it. You must enjoin the good and forbid the evil to the extent that if they see some wrong from the ruler, they say that's it. You have to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Pick up the swords against him. Go and deal with him. You must enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Go and deal with that ruler who is oppressing or doing wrong or whatever error he's made. Take up your swords against him in order to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. So again, you can see how they were deviated in that stance of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. That is a brief overview of the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila. Very brief overview of some of the main areas that they fell into error with. Next time then, we'll start with the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah. The Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah. And maybe we'll look at that in a bit more detail because there are so many upon the way of the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah. All of the Hanafis, the ones who claim to be Hanafi, they are basically Ash'ari and Maturidi. So we'll have a look at that from next time then, inshallah ta'ala. We'll stop on that for today then. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.